Dams. First item, this is probably a familiar one, is the roadway rehabilitation gap funding. So this is programmed out for the foreseeable future. This is the $500,000 request in each fiscal year here through FY28. That makes up the difference between the $1 million that we've said, countless times, right, is what we need to just maintain level average, and the $500,000 plus or minus that we get from the Chapter 90 state program for road work. So again, this puts us at that $1 million regardless of the potential roadway borrowing. That'll be on the ballot in the special election in early January. This is what we need. The town's network pavement condition index.
Cart paths that we sometimes call roads.
That's right.
Now, isn't this, in previous years, this has usually been a line item or a separate,
It's on the levy,
under the levy?
yeah.
Okay.
And that's where it'll be. It won't
Okay,
be,
'cause
it won't be.
I'm just looking at
Well, there's
the
been
funding
talks about where it
sources.
comes from, if it's gonna come from free cash. I mean, as my job as a department head and is identifying the
Yeah, it'll
need
come
and-
from the levy, it won't come from free cash.
and making the request, right? So
Well, we only
that's-
have, we had $1.7 million last year in free cash. We're gonna have maybe $2 million this year in free cash. And I just said, there's no way. This'll have to come from the levy, which the state takes a big frown on. They would prefer us not to do what we're doing, but and that's, having said that, they're also the same body of government that has not raised Chapter 90 money.
Right.
Now, they're sitting on, they had $5 billion, they spent 3.2 of it on various things, and one of the items they were entertaining was Chapter 90 money. There's a $2 billion left of the $5 billion that they got for COVID relief, okay, the state. And they haven't spoken on where that $2 billion is gonna go. But every community of the 351 would like to see some of that money, billion, go to fixing and upgrading, increasing Chapter 90 money. So even though they don't like what we're doing, in effect, they're not stepping up to what needs to be done at Chapter 90. It's been historically. Now, we started doing this about 5 years ago, I think, 6 years ago, putting this money in. I think it started at 300 and it went to 5.
Started at 200,000 or 300,000 for about a year, and then it was increased to 500. Yep.
Yeah.
So about since like 2017.
Just so
or
we could
18.
keep the roads in the poor condition that they're in. I don't know how else to say it.
Essentially we've talked about, right, our pavement management program and how we have everything mapped and we've got them scored, right, from a 0 to 100, that pavement condition index. So it's basically to stay at that D-62. That's what
Yeah.
we've managed to do. And we keep saying it's $1 million. In reality, it's probably more, right, with inflation and that sort of things
Yeah.
now. But we've been able to, the projects that we've done and the analysis we've done, we've maintained that average despite, increasing costs. But
So we would keep this if what we approved at town meeting, the $5 million that's gonna be voted on on the 4th of January, I understand from last evening's meeting. It would be $6 million, okay, the million and the 5 over the first 3, it would be $8 million, pardon me, because you're
Yes.
gonna do this over 3 years initially.
It really is,
5
yeah.
million
Yep.
and 3 million
Yep.
in the first 3 years to get roads done. And I was looking at it, and it looks like of our 90 miles of roads, that 8 million in the first 3 years are gonna do 32 miles of roadway, almost a third, basically, of what needs to be done road-wise. And I was looking at what Spencer did in 2018. They borrowed $19 million. Guess how many miles of roads they did? Plus, they did bridges, too. 20 miles for 19 million. We're gonna do 32 miles if this is approved with the million that were the Chapter 90 and the levy of 500,000. In the first 3 years, we're gonna do a third of the roads. Now, we're saying that it's gonna cost us 19 to get the other 58 miles done, maybe. 19 million was the total, so that would be if I took 8 million from 11 million to do the other 58 miles of roads. If we, going forward.
Yeah,
If we were
that's
to
right.
entertain any future borrowings.
Yeah, we're projecting
But we're
the
getting a
backlog.
lot of bang for our buck here when I look at 8 million to do a third of the roads of the 90 over the first 3 years. I mean, but then again, I'm looking at, well, What about me, the other 50, if I'm on that one of the 58 miles, well, what are you gonna do me next? I mean, if we continued with, at some point, we gotta decide if we're gonna get this all taken care of over the next, say, 10 years, 7 years, 8 years, and get it all done. But I looked at it, and I looked at what Spencer did, and they did 20 miles in bridges for 19, and we're talking about doing 32 miles for 8 million. And I'm saying, what do we know that they don't know, or how are you doing it? But
Well, they did bridges too, though, maybe that
yeah,
increases.
maybe the bridges.
That's a huge cost, yeah. You're looking
Yeah.
at probably, if it's bridge replacement, then it's a few $1 million
I
a
would think
piece.
so.
Even a superstructure replacement is gonna be a couple $1 million probably, and so that cost adds up quickly.
But I was looking at it, and I was looking at, well, they say 26 cents per thousand to do this, borrowing of 5 million. In average home was 240,000, medium home, and average is 262. And I was looking at it, so what is that per week? Well, on a 262, it's $1.32 a week. On a medium home of 240, it's $1.20 a week. I'm looking at cost, and then I'm looking at these roads that were cart paths that somebody put some stone down, and in the 1800s, when there was no environmental laws, they just poured some oil on the dirt and throw some stone down, and then in the 1900s, they put some tar, when tar was available in stone, and then, and now we've got, there's no road base, so, and that's where we got this up and down, and now we put some macadam down, and we call them roads, and it took us 300 years to get there. Do you think we can fix it in 10? I don't know. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying, now, my question is, there's different classifications of roads. And I know if you touch a road, depending on the classification, and it's your money, not the state's money, okay, they're gonna chime in and say, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, it's gotta have stormwater management, and you're gonna put this in, you're gonna do that, and then if there's any money left over, now you can pave the road. But you gotta do all this, and this, even though it's your money, not our money,
Yeah,
because
with-
it's a certain classification of roadway.
As far as drainage goes, well, that's prudent engineering though too, right? If you
Right.
have water
Sure.
issues, in most cases, if it is a heavily trafficked road, you wanna nip that in the bud, those issues, right? Because any investment we make in the paving, the first sign of cracks, you still have the water infiltration issues that are gonna contribute to that road deteriorating faster, right? So we tend to try to address drainage, on a arterial street, like you were saying, Mr. Ewell, the classification street. If it's an arterial, highly trafficked, like Sutton Ave, Main Street, or a collector street even, like your Dudley roads that funnel traffic from local roads
Right.
to either neighboring towns or to these arterial streets, you want to do that work. We can't be forced per se. I mean, the state Chapter 90 money, I mean, they look at our projects, they vet them when we send out a project request. We say, hey, this is our design, this is what we want to do. They look at it. I've yet to receive comments if we were proposing a project where we didn't add drainage into it, where they said, hey, you need to do this. But that could happen. It's not to say it couldn't. The other requirement, though, is despite whether it's town funding, local funding, or state funding, is the expectation if there's pedestrian facilities there, curb ramps, sidewalks, that you have to. If you're doing anything beyond just a fog seal, which is basically just like a driveway seal, so even if we were chip sealing it, if we were doing, certainly a mill and overlay, and we had those facilities, you have to add that in. The expectation, DOJ says, you need to do that. So,
Like I said, if there's any money
part of
left
the
over, you
ADA.
can do the road.
so that
Yeah.
contributes to the cost. When people say, well, how come we're not getting more done? It's prevailing wage. It's those sort of factors
Right.
that all weigh in. All factor into the cost of these
I'll
projects.
give you a good example, as you just finished Sac Rapid Bridge. Okay, we couldn't get state funding because it wasn't a bridge. We couldn't get state funding because it wasn't a dam. Couldn't get state funding because it wasn't a culvert. So it wasn't, so it was our money. We came up with the $900 and something thousand. And then they chimed in and said, well, you gotta build it like a bridge. You gotta go down to bedrock and build it like a dam.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, it was an historical piece of architecture, so you gotta keep an historical character to it, so you gotta have a nice stone facade to it. But they weren't around when it wasn't a bridge, it wasn't a dam, it wasn't a culvert, but now build it like a bridge, build it like a dam, but it's your money, but we're gonna tell you how to spend it. So you're talking about being a little hypocritical, and that's what I'm saying with these roads. If whether it's our money or their money, it's their way or the highway, pun intended. They're pretty tight on what we can and can't do. And a lot of people, I don't know, understand that. So that's why I wanted to voice that, because people seem to think if we do it, we can do what we want. No, you can't. Right? Am I wrong in saying that?
No, that's fair to say, yep. No, they still have a watchful eye on what we're doing.
On what
so,
you do,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, and just bringing us back to this specific request, this is just for maintaining current conditions, that's what this
In the
is.
current, in the current.
That's right.
So the current, what did you call it, D minus?
It's yeah, essentially 62 is what our network, that's the network average in town right now, so.
So not approving would be quite worse, I would think.
All right. I said my piece on the roads, because I'm very, living on this, one of the 10-town scenic roads, I can appreciate road conditions.
So the next request, highway-related request for FY '23, and this is, again, a resubmission, is the Mckinstry Pond Dam Rehabilitation Project at $800,000. There is potential for a grant to subsidize the construction cost through the EEA. It's the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs through their dam and seawall repair program, which we've applied several times now actually for that. We were fortunate enough this past summer, we applied for design and permitting monies through EEA, and we received that grant. We received over $55,000 to finalize the design for this project so that we can get it permitted, designed, and shovel-ready for the next round of construction grants in the spring of 2022. We're hopeful we have a competitive project that'll be looked upon favorably by EEA, but it is a competitive grant process, so who's to say how many towns are gonna apply in that round and what the needs will be. So there's no guarantee, but there has been a dam safety order in effect since June 9th, 2008. I actually have it here from DCR, saying that essentially this structure is a significant hazard potential structure and needs to be addressed immediately. So we've been working hand in hand with DCR. We've been doing routine inspections. We have a consultant on board that assists us with that to make sure that we're complying with DCR in the meantime. But essentially it's repair the structure or breach the dam, which doesn't seem like a viable solution, right? When you consider the folks that live around Mckinstry Pond and downstream of that dam. So there's an immediate need for this project regardless of whether the grant funding is there. So that's.
Will they enhance with that 3.2 billion that they just released? Some of that money went to dams and seawalls. Added funding for dams and seawalls in the state. So the money, there's more money based on what they just did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
There's a greater opportunity. I'm hoping that we'll prevail on some of that. If not all of it, part of it.
Was this not quite as urgent the last time it was submitted? I just saw it was a resubmission, so.
Oh, the urgency's always been there. It's a big ticket item. So there's always been an uncertainty as to what the cost will be, the true construction cost, because we've been annually now applying for this construction grant money. In the past, again, we weren't at that 100% design level though either. So it's possible that EEA looked at it and said, well, you're not quite there. We have other projects in other towns that are shovel ready. They got the design, the permits in hand. So they've given precedent to those projects.
Well, we did the Leicester Street Bridge a year ago for the 565.
We did, and you'd be happy to hear, maybe, I don't know, Mr. Ewell, that the state now has actually slated the repairs on that bridge under the Next Gen program. So we will now, that design and replacement will be funded through the state and overseen. It'll be a state project that'll happen in the next 3 or 4 years.
So the 565, we won't have to.
We won't have to spend. We've spent money on the design, unfortunately, to date, because we've had bridge reports in the past several years from DOT saying this needs to be addressed urgently. We had done some temporary shoring under that bridge, so we wouldn't have to close the road at 56, close the bridge. And even the District 3 bridge engineer had said the other day, I met out with the design team and DOT for a pre-scoping meeting. And he said, listen, we finally had a town that was proactive about this and got the design done and was heading in the right direction. And we're sorry that you had expended those funds on the design. That's now not going to be of use. But we're getting a much better project out of it, actually. So they're funding a complete superstructure replacement. So they're ripping out the steel beams and everything from that point up and replacing it in its entirety, whereas we were just repairing and refurbishing the beams and doing some repairs to the deck, that sort of thing. So it's a much more impactful project, but it does free up that $565,000 that was appropriated. That's a new development as of July 1.
We did something with
basically,
with Lowe's Pond as well, didn't we? Just the town managers.
That's a new program with DCR, so that's, the EEA that's a different,
I know.
different agency, right? So DCR has this program now essentially for, call them orphan dams, I guess, for lack of a better term, where you have a dam like Lowe's Pond that was on private property, and the property owner was, couldn't be tracked down essentially, was
Right.
negligent, was gone, right?
Probably an old mill.
So there's a few, Oxford will be one of the first towns to capitalize on this program where they'll fund, design or replacement of that structure, and then the town will take ownership of the structure. That's the caveat. But
Part of the
essentially
history of being a mill town with all these dams, and then now the legacy is
Yeah.
maintained them, and the mills are gone, and
Yeah.
it's up to us.
So unfortunately, that program, again, is for these dams that have sort of been abandoned, for abandoned dams, whereas the only really other avenue for dams such as Mckinstry Pond Dam is this EEA, this dam and seawall grant monies. But it's competitive based.
I hope it doesn't go the way that Sacarapa did, see, that's my concern. All right. What else do we have here?
So the next project, scheduled or requested in fiscal year 2024 for $300,000 is the Harwood Street Bridge cleaning and painting project. So this is the Harwood Street Bridge over the French River. If you're heading from Main Street towards Webster, before you hit Old Webster Road. You may recall we did do some repairs actually in 2016, I believe it was. We'd funded, I think out of Chapter 90 at the time, about $260,000, $270,000 to do some maintenance-related repairs to that bridge, which consisted of some spalling, concrete spall repairs underneath the bridge. We had done some slope paving to stabilize the banks around the abutments. The initial project scope was to include the painting at that time, the cleaning and painting, but when we got the bids back, the painting price was just exorbitant. It blew the budget. We rebid it a couple times at that time, and finally we said we're going to pull the painting scope out, we're going to do the maintenance repairs that we need to do, and we'll come back and revisit the painting. We also did some the joint repairs on either side, on the pavement, replaced the joints, painted the concrete bridge rails. So really all that's left to do on this bridge is to do the cleaning and painting on the steel beams. These are the steel beams that support the deck of the bridge. And I had some nice pictures that I went and had taken of that, where essentially the outside beams are bare steel right now, and there's a lot of corrosion, actually. So we want to get out ahead of that now before we let the corrosion get any worse, and then once you experience that section loss from the corrosion, that's when the structural capacity can be impacted. We don't want another Leicester Street Bridge on our hands, right? So this is a preventative maintenance project to hopefully forgo any substantial repairs in the future to that bridge, especially considering the town's invested over $250,000 already in repairing that bridge.
And you think it can wait until 24? Is the damage so severe?
I think it's significant. I mean, there's essentially no coating, right, on these.
Right.
The outside bridge girders really had none. The interior ones had some paint, some green paint still on them. They still do. They will be exposed to de-icing salts and the elements over that time. It's a couple years out. It's not like it's gonna drop down drastically, but within the next few years, certainly we'd want to address it. The longer we go out now, we're talked about doing this painting in 2016.
Right.
There was a need, so we're a few years removed from that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put it certainly any farther out than FY24.
Okay, but you wouldn't classify it as urgent, obviously.
Not yet, and the bridge reports from DOT don't state as much, but it is something that, they're saying to keep on your radar and address, so. Any other questions on that? And then the next project then is Old Webster Road Culvert Rehabilitation, scheduled for fiscal year 2025, $450,000 request. There's an existing corrugated metal pipe culvert beneath Old Webster Road. This is adjacent to Oxford Asphalt and the Sackcrete plant on Old Webster Road. And I believe Robbins Garden has a facility back there. The school buses lease some space back there as well. This is,
It used to be their old transfer station.
yeah. So it's a failing culvert, essentially. It's also significantly undersized, so it's been apparent actually with all the rainfall we've had this year. That's overtopped a couple times, that section of Old Webster Road. So there's actually several inches of water from the two impoundments on either side that just overwhelm that culvert and flood the road. So the scope of this project is to replace that culvert. It's also to reconstruct a few hundred feet of Old Webster Road in that vicinity, adding some roadside drainage in the gutter, some catch basins and piping, and then doing some wetland restoration on the outlet side of this culvert, where some of the sediment tracking that's been occurring from Sackcrete in that facility, the sediment, I had a nice picture of that. I hate to keep saying that, but you could see all the sediment out there, and what's happening is that it's making its way into the wetland at the outfall. So it's been negatively impacted by that sediment buildup. So we want to restore that and then pave a good section of that entrance to those facilities. So there's no more sediment tracking. We can kind of capture that back further on their property. There has been some preliminary discussions with those companies to contribute to the project cost for anything that we do outside of the town's right-of-way, and then potentially some of that wetland restoration as well. So we've presented that to at least one of the property owners there. We're still working through the design. The design for this project is funded and is near probably 90% complete at this point. So this is just for the construction costs, which again may be subsidized
They
by.
heavily use that in Charlton Street Road, the Sackcrete trucks and the asphalt trucks. There is a constant parade up and down every day. I mean, the flatbed trucks, I counted in one day 5 Sackcrete flatbed trucks going down Charlton Street at one point in the day, and I probably missed a couple. So they do use our roadways consistently, daily, and a lot of weight on those trucks, by the way. So I would think that they would want to contribute to the project. Between them and the asphalt trucks that go up and down, the 10-wheel trucks that are constantly going up and down Charlton Street, coming from the asphalt plant there on Old Webster Road. A lot of traffic, not to mention the people that work at IPG that come back and down Old Webster Road in their vehicles every day. A lot of traffic there, a lot of traffic on Old Webster Road. Be surprised at how much industry traffic and for worker traffic for IPG that go up and down that road on a daily basis. Very.
And the final highway-related project here, slated for FY 2026 for $200,000, is the Hall Road Culvert Rehabilitation. So somewhat similar scope to the Old Webster Road project, although this road is not as heavily traveled, but it is a dead-end road essentially, right? So there's at least one house after the culvert that can't be accessed beyond Hall Road. There is some private property means of egress over to the Water Street neighborhood area, but it's private property, so emergency vehicles, town vehicles really are not supposed to pass through there. So as far as plowing access, emergency vehicle access is from Main Street on Hall Road, and you have to cross over this culvert, which is a series of corrugated metal pipes that are, again, same condition as Old Webster Road, corroding, collapsing, and undersized. This road has been routinely overtopped as well, and run the risk of a more catastrophic failure, something that we had similar at Industrial Park West, right, this year, where we had the road actually completely wash out.
Sure.
So if that's the case, then you've cut off access to at least one property over there. So really not an option to let this culvert continue to deteriorate and risk failure. So this is another project. We have design underway, and the construction cost, preliminary construction cost estimate is upwards of $200,000. $200,000, but hopefully, that's a conservative estimate, in my opinion.
This is something you do in-house, right?
This one is a little more involved because there's certain, with this type of replacement, this is, it's not an intermittent stream, it's a perennial stream through there. So there's stream crossing standards through DER that we have to consider. We know that there's been reports of fish, that this is like cold water fishery, essentially a fish passage in this area. So it opens up some other standards that we need to uphold, basically. So in that
Even though
case,
it's our money, we're gonna tell you how to spend it.
it's one of those things. So
I hear you.
that's why we got the consultant involved, and it may just be something that we contract out. We put it out to bid and get it done in a more timely fashion. Not that we don't have the capabilities, but this, again, water control is more of an issue here. You have the railroad. Immediately, only 10, 15 feet upstream from it is the railroad and their culvert crossing. There's some variables there that we may be best suited to just contracting this out to someone that does this on a daily basis. So,
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
So that takes care of road rehabilitation.
that's right. And then the final submission is sewer related, and it's for sewer pump replacement at various locations we called out. So various locations, various pump stations, essentially, meaning that this would be replacement pumps for looking at Greenbrier Pump Station, specifically Thayer Pond Pump Station, where
Webster Road.
we don't have presently any backup pumps. Right, so if a pump goes down, we don't have a functioning pump station. We're looking at bringing in vac trucks to suck the wet well out and bringing that to a treatment facility for disposal. It's just not something that we want to have to worry about, right? To do that'd really be an emergency scenario if that were the case, if these pumps were to go down. So if we can purchase new pumps, pull the old ones out, refurbish them for backups, we'd avoid that scenario.
So you're talking about Greenbrier, Thayer Pond Village and
Yep.
Old Webster Road?
Because as we spoke, right,
Yeah.
Mr. Yule, there was some money appropriated for
12
pump
and
replacements
56.
at, the 12 and 56 pump station, the Oxford High School pump station, so
Right.
we're working through those replacements now.
That was 67,000.
67,000,
That
right?
still hasn't been done though, right? You're still
No,
waiting on.
we're still working through that project.
COVID again?
Hope to have that complete this winter. That's the thing, the most noteworthy point here, right, is, planning ahead for these sewer pump replacements. These aren't items that are just sitting on shelves. We can't just go to the pump store and pick these things up. These need to be, there's a production time for these that's several weeks under normal circumstances, more like months now. So we want to get out ahead of it and have these spare pumps on hand at the pump stations, ready to just be dropped in when we need them.
And the thought is to rebuild if we can, if
Yes.
warranted, if
Yep.
possible, depending on the condition of the pump you're replacing.
That's right.
So you're gonna be able to rotate these. It's critical. I mean, it's like if your septic system overflows, you're not living in your home. So this is gonna affect a home. This would affect a number of homes.
Yeah, and like I said, if they went down, we'd have to pump out that wet well before we had an overflow, essentially. And we're bringing in an outside vendor, paying for their time and their equipment, or we've got an intermunicipal agreement with, say, Auburn. We could use their vac truck, but we ultimately get charged for that. So we're paying one way or the other.
What's the capacity of the wet well?
It varies depending on the stations. So you may get, you'd have to be pumping pretty regularly, bypass pumping, if that was
Daily.
daily, essentially, multiple times. You'd have to probably have you may have to have rounds of trucks. If it's Greenbrier and the school's in
School's
full
all-
swing, the flow is significant, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't take long for those wet wells to fill up.
Yeah, a disaster. So you're still waiting on 12 and 56 pumps, basically.
Yeah, we're working through the exact scope, what we were trying to accomplish with that project, and whether we were going to be able to count on rebuilding the pumps that are in there. We're actually getting some new quotes now as we speak. So we're hopeful, like I said, that's a project we hope to complete this winter and tackle this winter. I know the money's a little old, but it's one of those things, right, since I've been on board too, there's a whole slew of previous year, capital projects, FY '21, and even beyond that, FY '20, that that I'm unpacking as I go on, right? So that
Yeah,
was
no.
one that is certainly on the priority list, but was a little further down.
And just for my understanding, because maybe this was mentioned earlier, but the difference between the enterprise funds and the department funds?
Well, the enterprise funds are the receipts generated from water and sewer that the users pay, funds the enhancements or the repair of so it doesn't come out of the budget, so to
Right.
speak, it comes out of user fees.
Right, okay.
So, but, they're expecting that they can use the facilities, literally, and so we have to maintain them with their money, and that's what that's what the 67 was for, but now it's been delayed, or was delayed,
Yeah.
now it's gonna be. COVID's done a lot to a lot of different things that, you wouldn't think would.
So does
No,
this increase the fees then, or no? Just
The
for-
fees were increased, about,
Back a couple of years
Years
ago,
ago,
I think
2
was the
years
last
ago,
time. 19, I believe.
it was about 19, and I don't think we
19.
needed to
We
increase
haven't-
them.
no, we
No,
haven't
there
since
hasn't been
then.
no usage-wise. Again, people are trying to be conservative, and everybody's thinking green, and so if you use less of the, if you're more prudent, and then the fees aren't gonna go up, and the utilization's gonna be stable, so. I don't know, I mean, operating cost-wise, it hasn't been a problem. I know
No,
we did
not-
a study on infiltration of
That
stormwater.
is something we still need to address,
Address,
right?
and
We
that's
have,
been
especially in wet weather, we're seeing the daily flow spike, and that's essentially water that's entering the system
It
that we're
shouldn't be.
getting charged from Auburn, right? Say if
To
it's in our north,
process stormwater.
to process stormwater, right? So we're not collecting revenue for that flow. So that's something where is
We don't know where
ongoing.
it's coming from, or
We've done some smoke testing up in the north. It's the north service area where we have the issue. We've done some smoke testing. We're not able to identify it. We've got some other plans to do some additional testing. I was sharing with Mr. Yule earlier, though. There's some other things happening up along Route 20, right, with the DOT's large infrastructure, corridor
Right.
improvements project there. They'll actually need to do some replacements of our existing gravity lines up there where we think we're having the issue. So I'm hopeful that this new infrastructure, this will be over the next few years when they install this, but hopefully that, nips some of the I&I issues in the bud. But time will tell. We'll continue to do our I&I investigations though until that time, see if we can't pinpoint it.
We're trying to figure out where it's coming from.
Could be it's leaky joints in a pipe,
Something's-
leaky connection to a sewer manhole, or leaky cover. All those things have been vetted at this point. The smoke testing is usually pretty telling, but for whatever reason, we couldn't pinpoint it, so. And it's wet weather, again, it's when we have these real high rainfall events that we really are seeing the impacts from that, so.
But you're on it, I mean, and hopefully what the state's gonna do with 20, that replacing that section, that may alleviate the problem, but if not,
Well, yeah,
because that
Maybe-
will impact rates.
Right.
Because you're getting charged, all of a sudden, you only used X, but they're processing Y.
Right.
Then the difference is to you, the ratepayer.
Right.
So, there's been a concern on that, and I know you guys have been,
Yeah.
it goes back to Sean, I think,
Yep.
when he started looking at it. And back when we were looking at raising rates or not raising rates, and
Yeah.
what the impact was. So there's somewhere there's a fly in the ointment, we're looking to fix it.
Yeah, and if we find out, over the next year or so, if we continue to do these I&I investigation, and it's in an area where we know the state is gonna come in and replace that anyways, well, we buy our time for a couple of years maybe, or maybe we can do some temporary lower cost, Band-Aid, but, we'll count on that replacement to fix that issue is the hope, but we'll try to pinpoint the issue before that, though, certainly.
Okay, well, I thank you, if there's no other questions of Jared, appreciate
No,
a
thank you.
long, lengthy, detailed meeting, as it always is for the DPW, because you do so much. I mean, you do everything from striking the colors every morning to lowering the flag. Why can't, I was thinking about that tomorrow being Veterans Day. I'd like to see the VFW or the American Legion step up to the plate and take that off your plate, so to speak, and let volunteers of those two organizations strike the colors on a daily and evening basis.
All
My
for that.
grandfather
We
used to do
talked-
that.
Yeah, we regularly communicate with them. I know there was volunteers from VFWs that always help with setting
Sure.
the signs, installing the signs.
I think
on the
they'd love to
poles,
do
so,
that.
Yeah, yeah, that's something,
Something
we have to.
my grandfather, being a World War I veteran, loved to do. He walked uptown every day and struck the colors every morning and took them down, rain, shine, shit, or snow, and he walked a good mile and a half in his 70s to do that. So it's something that maybe the two organizations could entertain taking on.
Certainly.
One less thing you'd have to worry about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared.
All right. Now that Ms. Gacy's joined us, we can take a vote, and the vote would be to approve last meeting's meeting minutes of November the 3rd. And if you all take a moment to read them and make sure that they're acceptable, if there's any additions or deletions or changes, let me know. If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes of November the 3rd.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 4 in the affirmative, 1 absent. And new business? I don't have any. If anybody else, the next meeting, I guess, will be the 17th.
Next week.
And we have,
And then we skip a week,
Police.
right?
Police does not have any capital requests,
what?
so I am moving school department to next week.
Very good. Well, I know they got a grant for bulletproof vests, so that was good.
Oh.
Yeah, they did get a they got like 9,000 and change, and the state gave them a matching. They matched it, so they ended up with the 19,000 or in change, and they were able to equip the police force with new bulletproof vests, which have a sunset law, or basically they're only good for so many years. After so many, I think after 5 years, they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
So there's enough that they have enough money to make sure that every officer has a bulletproof vest. So that's great. That's great. So the school committee will be here.
Next Wednesday, yes.
Both Bay
Also
Path,
got new agendas.
both Bay Path and
Bay
local.
Path will be here in the spring for the budget.
They're not coming,
Not
no,
for the capital.
not just the capital, okay, yeah, yeah, all right. So we'll see Justin next week. Any old business? None that I can think of. Anybody have any? No? If not, we discussed the meeting for the 17th. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. 4 in the affirmative, 1 absent.